Hey, what's going on? Can you hear me? Can you hear me at all?
Hey, Brendan, how you doing?
Good. How's it going?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming on. So how was the day? What's going on? You've been working with Dr. Hannah for 3 months now?
Shorter, so I guess September 1 was the official start date. It was actually a great sort of transition in because we had been talking about strategy, how to get integrated. And unlike anything that you and I had done before, where, there's an official start time, you go from
Yeah.
being a medical student to being a resident, in 24 hours. It's a hard start. This was a much more fun transition into it. I was able to, get a little bit more acclimated with the clinic, with the practice, a couple of patients, which was nice. And letting things roll as they go.
Yeah. And you're right. It is a much more fun transition than the hard cut of July 1st and just getting thrown into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah, it's you almost need that like shock, I think, to get you through it. But it's been much more pleasant of a start out in the real.
Yeah. It was so interesting. I think like right around September 1st was my first day starting as well. Did it take you a while to get all the licenses, all like everything all in order? No?
Oh yeah, I mean, paperwork is just a nightmare, and I'll be pretty open in saying that bureaucracies really are just my nightmare. And we're still going through quite a bit of that, unfortunately. But glad to say that most of it's behind us and ready to roll, just ready to start doing what we want to do, which is take care of patients well and integrate into the practice.
Yeah. Oh my God. Don't even get me started on the bureaucracy. Like there was a while I was waiting weeks. I was just calling the department like, hey, so where's my license? Do you need any more materials? Is it in the email? Can you open up the email? You can't. Why not? And it was like two women. They were managing 23 different departments or like whatever it was. They have two people working on these poor women. They're like sitting there going through emails all day. I felt bad. They got to hire more people. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I'm
well,
sure.
you're right in that it's astounding how much burden they put on a small group, and they're good people, they're kind people who genuinely I think want to help you. They don't want to be prohibitive, but just the system precludes you from making a lot of progress. And it's quite frustrating at the beginning because you've done all this work, you've done all this training, you've landed the job of your dreams, and you just need to get these couple of T's crossed and I's dotted, and there's so much on the line. You
Mm-hmm.
can't start before these things are put into action. And you kind of just sit there waiting with nothing to do but just sort of watching the clock tick. And it can be frustrating. But I agree with you. I think that they're good people on the other side of it who are just completely overburdened and they have much more
Overloaded.
responsibility than they would like. Yeah.
They're so overloaded. And you know what? I don't know if you were the same way, but as a resident, it's very tough month to month, but you do get some income. When you graduate, that income comes to a stop and you might not be starting your job the first, the
Right.
second week of July. I mean, you and I, we started in September. So that was 2 months of credit card bills, of food, of travel, of just basic living expenses that 2 months packs on a lot. And I don't want to go into like, how like to manage the financial burden and not because we're not financial planners, but like I think for residents listening to this is like you need to have a plan. You need to know where you're going to get your job. It's got to be your dream job,
Mhm.
but you need to have a plan in place to get through those couple months, living with family, however it is. Do you agree? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. But I also think that time is best spent just exploring the world that at least I had been sort of secluded from for so many years. I just went and traveled, and I traveled big. Like I was dramatic
Where'd you go? Tell me about it.
in my destinations. I did Sicily. I started out in Sicily for a wedding, went up to sort of the south of France through Barcelona, which was really fun. And then I met a girlfriend out east. So we landed in Singapore. We're in Singapore for a couple of days, unbelievable, and then went to Bali.
How long did it take you to do all this? That's
Probably like maybe like 3 weeks worth of travel. Uh,
wow.
it was like a sort of quick go as I by design, but it was an unbelievable time in my life. The reality is that there won't ever really be a perfect time to do travel like that.
Right.
And when we're older and sort of approaching retirement, and you can, that's probably a time that most people do it. But we're privileged to have this little slot in between where you know that you have a chunk of income coming your way, so there
Mm.
is reliability there, but you don't have any responsibility at the moment. Of course, everyone's personal circumstances are unique, but I don't know. I had the luxury of just sort of disappearing from the U.S. for some time, and it was great. I just exploring different cultures, traveling, seeing the different foods, wines, which I really enjoy, spending time with friends, living in a totally different time zone from anyone else that I knew. In and of itself was fun. But yeah, for a lot of the viewers listening, even if you're in med school before you start residency, or residency and end of training before you start your job, I think very strongly encourage you to go out and travel and do something, because it was refreshing. I got back like so motivated and just eager to start operating again. And that's where it should be, I think.
Can't agree more. It was funny because about a year ago when I finally spoke with Dr. Hanna for the first time, he was saying like exactly what you said. That window of opportunity, it's tough, and making those pay. Take out a loan if you got to do it. When is another time you're going to be able to step out for 3 weeks to see the world? Some people, you got to look ahead and be realistic. Like, it's going to be hard to leave your patients that long. It just is. It's going to be hard to say you own your own business, say you're working in a practice. Your employer's not going to be so happy with you leaving for 2 to 3 weeks. Your own practice, you need to pay your employees for 2 to 3 weeks while you're gone without any income. Like, the responsibilities just tack on. Tell me about your wine experience. You said you're big into wine, right? Tell me about that.
Yeah.
What did you have?
Yeah. Got into wine through my family. My dad's a bit of a connoisseur, so he sort of taught me everything I know. It's funny, actually, because during COVID, everyone developed a little bit of a hobby, and wine was already an interest of mine, but I wanted to take a totally deep dive. And so I did, and I joined like a wine course, and I didn't start like at the very beginner level. I was like, oh no, I know enough that I could start probably at like the second lowest level. Got signed up to end up with a certificate to be able to be a bartender at the end of it.
Nice.
And then they shipped me all these books of materials, and they sort of marketed it as something that would take maybe like 3 or 4 hours per week. And I was like, well, it's kind of a lot, but it's COVID. I don't have anything else to do. I'm still a resident. Like, let's go for it. No, I could not keep up with that. It is the only class I've ever failed. And I am a wine school dropout.
That's really funny.
But and I think it's sort of something that I like to sort of say and like make humor out of, because so many other aspects of my life, I'm sure you could relate, and people who are interested in medicine and want to be overachievers, you got to realize what are your limitations, when should you push harder, and when should you scale back.
Yeah.
And like drinking at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday when you're a resident, even if it's COVID times, is probably not the thing you should invest your energy in. So I like pulled out of the class, but I had all of the materials. So I started, reviewing a lot of the books and started sort of self-educating in that way. These courses, they sort of start a little bit on grape variety and, where are these different type of grapes. And then they very quickly go to geography. And I kind of skipped that piece because I have a sense of, what wines come from different regions, but that's not something I want to get super granular on. I want to be like the kind of wine consumer who can know exactly what they like, know why they like this in a wine, and then know how to order that appropriately when you go to different events and different places. So back to your original question, when the biggest wine experience I had on that trip was traveling from Barcelona to the south of France. And one very cool thing happened, which is completely unplanned, and that is traveling on the Spanish-French border on the Spanish side. I had met my parents on this trip, and when we were on the Spanish side, they were driving through and they found a vineyard with our family last name on it.
No way.
Yeah. So my family name is Plana. Both of my parents are Cuban, and it's Spanish origin. My dad did the 23andMe thing, and he's like 90% Iberian. Surprise, surprise. But just on this drive over to the south of France, he sees this vineyard with our last name on it. And so, we had a really nice time, on the beachfront. And then on their way back to Barcelona, which is where we were flying out of, we like stopped at the vineyard and got a whole tour. They are, making and producing olive oil as well. So started tasting some of the olive oil, bought a bunch of bottles. And it was sort of a nice piece of surprise. There was a good surprise element there, but like so much history, and we're like, we don't really know how, if at all, that family tree ties into ours. It's very likely that it does, but we're probably, several generations removed. But it's that's a piece of the world that you would never see if you sort of stay in your element and don't discover something new and different. Right. So That was a real highlight of the trip.
That's so important too. That's so cool. Do you still have bottles with like your name on it from the vineyard?
Yeah, well, this trip was just what, like maybe 3 months ago at this point. So I actually stole some of the corks, not stole, but like grabbed
You didn't
and
ship any
took
back
it.
though. You didn't ship any bottles back to the U.S.
Yeah, no, we definitely bought some
Okay.
bottles of wine and olive oil.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to have to meet in the city one of these days. I want to try one of those wine. I love, do you like red or white also?
Well, I have a palate for both, but like
Both
red
of
would
them.
be my preference. Yeah.
Same.
I like if I could only have one wine for the rest of my life, like I can't limit to like a specific,
Mm.
like vineyard, but probably a Napa Cab would be, where I would sit
Okay.
forever.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
with
good.
like a juicy steak.
Yeah.
And then, my arteries would clog and that would be it.
And then you're done.
And I
I
live a
do like
happy
Napa
life.
cabs.
Yeah.
Napa cabs are good. I also, what do you think of Malbec? Argentinian Malbec, maybe Chile?
Yeah, beautiful wines.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually not too long ago had the privilege to travel to Argentina and
What
had
was
some
this?
really great wine. This was during fellowship.
Oh, okay. So,
So
and was fellowship for you 1 or 2 years? Because you were at NYU. Was that 1 or 2 years? And we'll get into all. I want to know the pathway and everything. But yeah, please do.
sure.
So you went to Argentina.
Yeah, 1 year fellowship. It's funny because in this podcast, like listening in, you'd probably think I was an avid traveler, and I didn't really travel much during residency.
Well, I know. I know
So
how it goes.
yeah, I had many co-residents who did, and I actually learned from them. Like, just do it. Even
Mm.
if you go on a budget or whatever, just go for it. So during fellowship, I took one vacation in the winter time and went to Argentina because it's their summer. And so did some days in Argentina and then crossed over to Uruguay and went to this fantastic beach town in Uruguay called Punta del Este.
Ah,
Put it on your book if you like sort of chill beach towns.
I do.
It's a common destination for like electronic dance concerts too. Not why I went, but found out coincidentally.
Who was there? Who was playing?
No, nobody was playing when I was there, but I sort of on the trip learned that it's a very common sort of spot for that, and a lot of groupies will travel to and enjoy
I
that
like
kind of
that.
scene.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But anyways, the Malbecs, yeah, delicious wines. You have to really like a full-bodied red to appreciate a good Malbec. But yeah, no, I very much enjoy it, and paired with a lot of the Argentinian meats, I think is just heavenly.
Yeah. 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 I thought I asked. So yeah, why don't we get into that now then? Because dude, like residency is not an easy time to travel, but somehow like people throughout residency they make it happen. I know what is it like clerkships or something when you have a rotation for a month, and somehow when you're on an off service rotation, they might give you 2 weeks off. So that is a good time to travel. From my friends that did it, I didn't have any of those. Would you agree? Is that when it's a good time to fit it in? And then I want to know, was it only Argentina that you went during residency, or so? Also, and then I want to backtrack too. You were at UPenn at residency. Fellowship was here at NYU in Manhattan.
That's
You
right.
stayed in Manhattan after. But why don't we go back to the start? Where'd you go to medical school?
I went to NYU for medical school,
Right, right,
so
right, right.
yeah,
I
I
want
bleed
listeners
violet
to
too.
hear. Yeah, I want if we could go through it because I know
Sure.
some pieces, right? But I want listeners to really
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah, sure. So I'll kind of give you sort of a timeline of like where I've lived and why. So I grew up in Miami, absolutely loved it. I had such a phenomenal childhood for
Goodbye.
so many reasons, but like Miami was a real character. And I was a dancer growing up. That was sort of like my life, my passion. I really, really enjoyed it. Like, was a good student. I was disciplined and organized and all of that. But like dance was, where my focus was. And then when it came time to go to college, like I wasn't hugely academic. Like I had, the good grades and I wanted to do well, but I don't know, Miami's not a very academic sort of city to say. So I didn't like college was certainly a plan, but it wasn't so thought of in advance and, didn't really prepare for it as much. And so when I went to college, when it came time to like apply to college, I was like, what should I do? I actually wanted to stay in Miami and I wanted to go to the University of Miami. It was like not far from where I lived. A lot of my friends were still there. And it was my mom who discouraged me from doing that. And she's like, no, Natalie, spread your wings, go somewhere far, enjoy it, like pick a cool place to live and do it. And I was a dancer at the time, and like in the mail, I had gotten some invitations to audition for a couple of different companies. And so my mom very strongly encouraged me to audition for a modern dance company that was based in New York City. And they had an affiliation with Fordham College. So to my amazement, I came to New York City for a weekend with my sister and girlfriends, auditioned, had no expectation of getting past any certain rounds, and I made it through into this school, which is unbelievable. So the school was the Ailey School, Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. And my mom was like, if you think that you're not going to take this, you're nuts. This is just what's going to happen, Not in a forceful way, but just sort of,
appreciative
opening my eyes to how foolish it
gratitude.
would be not to take an opportunity like this. So I did it, and it was the best decision I made in my whole life. And so that's what brought me to New York. So, turned 18, a week later, came to college. So I was part dance, part school. So originally my major was a fine arts major. I was going to get a Bachelor of Fine Arts. And because of that affiliation with the dance school, Fordham has two campuses, one up in the Bronx, one in Lincoln Center. So I attended the Lincoln Center College, and I would go to my dance classes, go to my academic classes. But even as a freshman, I sort of knew pre-med was going to be sort of an option for me, and I didn't want to let go of that. It was so apparent to me, math and science came so easy to me, and everything else was a struggle. I had to actually work for those other classes, which was, doable for sure, but less fun. And so I was like, no, I want to go pre-med. For the first 3 years of college, I was pre-med and dance. And then, I was talented enough as a dancer to make it into this world, but the talent, was exhausted at that point. That it wasn't really going to take me much further than it did. But it was one of the greatest gifts that dance gave me, was not just coming to New York, but getting me into sort of an environment like that. But anyways, so then stopped dancing in my junior year of college, started studying for the MCAT. And then I went to NYU for medical school. I really wanted to stay in the city.
Why'd you want to stay in the city? You didn't want to go back to Miami? You didn't want to try the West Coast? I'm just curious because location can really determine, because now you're back in the city still. I'm just curious, was that always the plan?
Yeah, sort of. I kind of use this analogy, but I basically was infected with a New York City bug, the moment I got here. You're from Long Island. You get it. This city is either one to absolutely love or totally hate. I was at an event recently and Mayor Adams spoke, and he said a very nice line, which is there are only two people in this world, either the people who live in New York or the people that wish they could. And while I don't necessarily agree with that, because it's
it's
ultra biased, but I do think that New York City is a special place. There's something in the air here. There is an energy that's not quite replicable. And I haven't traveled the world in the way that I would like to, but I haven't seen any other city like this one. It just pushes you, it challenges you, it wants you to seek more. At least me, right? I should actually sort of say it in reference to myself, but it's challenged me, it's encouraged me, it's discouraged me in some ways. A lot of it too is because of the age that I moved to New York. But it both lifts you up and humbles you at the same time. And I think that's kind of a way that, that's sort of an external influence that I really like in my life. And I haven't felt that in any other city.
It's funny. Yeah.
I keep sort of derailing. I don't know. I'll let you ask the question, but I'll get back on track.
No, you don't have to be a track or anything. We're chatting. This is I don't know, a lot of podcasts they want to go into. So what's the surgical technique of the face? I'm not gonna. I just want to chat and get to know you a little bit, And
Sure.
So what I was gonna say was I went to Miami for a wedding. This is now a year and a half ago. So I think I was there one more time. We went to a place called El Patio.
Oh yeah, I know.
I think I was my friend and I was with three other guys, and we were the only white guys in the place. But I wish I knew as much Spanish as I know now back then. But it's always a lot of fun. Spanish is very important in Miami. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Are you fluent? Yeah, I'm sure, right?
Fortunately, yes. I will say, I wish my grammar was just a little bit better. It was, and I kind of lost it. During residency, I was in a very non-Spanish speaking part of the world. And so I kind of lost my groove a little bit. And I think my medical Spanish is kind of embarrassing. So I gotta work on my medical Spanish. But no, I'm fluent. Miami is such an interesting place for many reasons, but I think that the Spanish influence has been almost like a defining feature of the city. My family's Cuban, and my parents came to the U.S. Like in the '70s when there was a real inflection point in the city for sort of that influx, and Cuban-Americans had a big role to play for that. And the U.S. was very generous to that demographic and community. But it's funny because people travel to Miami and they don't expect there to hear so much Spanish, and it almost becomes difficult to communicate with some of the locals, or like you get an Uber driver from the airport, you have no idea where you are, and it can be a
Yeah.
little bit tough. But I don't know, I kind of like that. I think it gives the city a lot of character, and I think it's something that's unique and fun.
I love it. I love it. Te gusta Buena Vista Social Club, or are you
Yeah.
familiar?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So it's funny. There's a play on Broadway for the Buena Vista Social Club.
Yeah.
So for the viewers, the Buena Vista Social Club was a music band that was very popular and Cuban based. And my parents love the Buena Vista Social Club,
Yeah.
and they went to see the play in Broadway. Yeah, and I haven't seen it. It's on my list. I really want to go check it out.
Me too.
Everyone that I've spoken to about it, and that's probably like just like half a dozen people or more, have just absolutely loved it. They say it's a big concert. There's a lot of dancing, there's a lot of music, it's uplifting and fun. But what's cool about the plays, I understand, is it gives a lot of history because the music exists sort of in the geopolitical context of what was going on with the Cuban Revolution. This was sort of in the era of communism rising, and a lot of that coming from the Soviet Union, and Cuba sort of having a role to play as a very small but strong-willed island with close
Mm.
proximity to the U.S. In a world of communism and anti-capitalism, anti-America, the United States has its vulnerable point with Cuba
Yeah.
because any nuclear weapon can be placed on that island and be very destructive.
Yeah.
Don't and this is sort of like a life lesson, but don't ignore the small places or the small people because they could be exactly the Achilles heel that you can't
Mm.
overcome. But what's unfortunate about all of that is that communism just totally destroyed the Cuban people, and the country has never really recovered from it. After the
Mm.
revolution in 1959, there was a huge exodus of Cubans coming to Miami. My parents and my grandparents came in the early 70s. So they were part of like that second wave of immigrants. And so to them, the United States represents, like, it really is the American dream that they're chasing. And
Mm.
I really got to credit my parents. They are the epitome of that dream. Like, they've really made it happen for themselves, and it's a phenomenon.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
so great that they were able to get out there and come to the United States where there's much more opportunity and stuff. What do they do? I'm curious.
Yeah, so my dad is a healthcare entrepreneur, essentially. He had some very humble beginnings in the healthcare space and sort of grew to develop a number of healthcare companies he essentially sort of cares for the elderly and vulnerable population
Mm.
and has care management, very innovative home-based services, nutrition, and home-based meals to try to keep these individuals at home and in the community outside of the nursing facilities, outside of the hospitals, which ultimately is a huge cost saving. So he is an absolute visionary, just a badass individual, if I can say that. And I'm very proud of so much that he's given me, but like I'm proud to sort of share that publicly and like through a podcast like this because I don't usually like speak highly. Not that I don't speak highly, like I'm not like very open and vocal about praising my dad in public, but he is of me. Like he's really, really proud of me and like doesn't miss a beat
Aw.
to talk about me or my siblings. So I'm happy to be able to reciprocate that back.
Oh, I love that. I love that, and that you do. That also sounds amazing because they both came to America, and then they were also able to make it. You said he's very entrepreneurial, he's very innovative, and it takes a lot of creativity to kind of find the gaps and make it for yourself. And that's what the American dream is all about, right? Is to find the opportunity, make the most of it, and obviously reap its rewards in a lifestyle, and not to necessarily make like so much money. That's not what it's about. It's about the freedom. It's about that opportunity. It's about making the most of it and, limiting the amount of regrets because it is a big chance to come over to a completely new country like that from Cuba, especially during such a time of turmoil and whatnot. And then to make that for themselves and then to raise you too. And you're so successful. Of course, he's a proud father, right? Like that's an amazing story. And so, oh, just and one thing I wanted to say, the hotel we were staying at in Miami, I love because I love the Cuban influence on Miami down there. I mean, I've been learning Spanish the last 5, 6, 7 years, and they had these little, I think they called it a cafecito. It was this tiny
Mhm.
little shot of espresso in the lobby of the. It was like there's water, ice water, and then there's like it was during the
That stuff
wedding.
is strong.
That stuff will wake you up. Have a quick two of those on your way to the gym in the morning. You're ready to
Yeah.
go. Let me tell you. All of a sudden, you're hitting personal records on your on your squats or something.
Yeah, no, there's you got to be careful with that stuff. It
It's like
should almost
diesel.
be illegal. Funny enough, like should be a point of embarrassment, but it's not. I don't drink coffee,
Oh
so
no!
I'm a Cuban-American who doesn't drink any
All right,
coffee.
don't let your dad listen to
Um,
this. We won't let your dad here.
no, actually, he and my mom are the culprits of that. I watched them and their dependents growing up, and coffee is a culture. It's just like part of daily life in Miami. There's like socialization with it. You go to the nail salon, or you go to the barber or something. Like it's almost rude not to offer somebody a little shot of espresso. It's only ruder to turn it down. But yeah, no, I like used to have migraines and stuff, and caffeine was a big killer, so I didn't want to develop too much of a tolerance. But more
Mm.
than anything, I just didn't want to sort of follow in that lifestyle. So I never really got into it. Didn't like the taste, and sort of let it be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They were good. They were definitely good down there. No, I totally hear you. I hear you on that.
Yeah.
So let's go into medical school, right? And then you went to residency at UPenn. What kind of when did the whole plastic surgery like when did that kind of route develop? That direction, that interest, the passion.
Sure. It was somewhat by coincidence, honestly. What's funny about like medical education is that you have these designated rotations, and they're pretty standardized. But a lot of the subspecialties you have to kind of seek out in an elective.
Mm.
And so coming into medical school, like day two, I kind of started to understand, you're at a crossroads between doing something medical versus something surgical. And that was like the easiest decision for me. Like I was surgical all the way, like no medical specialty. They were fascinating. I liked my rotations. I saw myself, being, very content doing those things, but I got excited about surgery. And then
Mm.
the question was, well, what type of surgeon do I want to be? And it was on a general surgery rotation that I started seeing like the plastic surgery residents come in. And I saw the same residents like on different cases. So like there was an abdominal hernia repair that I was scrubbing in with the general surgeons. And then like a plastic surgery resident came in and closed. So I was like, oh, cool. Like I didn't know that they could do that. Yeah, that's interesting. And then like a couple of days later, there was like another like perineal recon. And like general surgery's portion was, not insignificant, but like so much of it relied on the plastic surgeon. And so
Mm.
that's when I started to get an understanding of like how expansive reconstruction can be. And then so on my general surgery rotation, I kind of asked like, hey, can I hang out with the plastic surgeons for like a couple of days, whatever. And they were all, for very supportive. And then I scrubbed in on a rhinoplasty, and I was like, whoa, now this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And it wasn't necessarily
Wow.
rhinoplasty in particular, but it was just
Yeah.
like operating on the face, listening to the surgeon sort of talk about facial proportions and balance. And, my eyes just went to the dorsal hump. There were so many other details that made like a big difference. And I couldn't really see what they were doing because rhinoplasties are hard to visualize when you're sort of like the fifth person removed. But just sort of getting a lay of the land, suture type. There was so complex and individualized that like I was immediately drawn.
Mm.
And I was very lucky. Like I had a lot of reasons that I wanted to go to NYU for medical school, but none of them were that they had such a strong plastic surgery department. Like that's something that I learned after the fact, and it was quite serendipitous for me. So I sort of developed this interest, and the timing just worked out perfectly where they had just hired a new departmental chair, Eduardo Rodriguez, who had come from Baltimore. He'd done a face transplant in Baltimore, and they brought him over to do face transplants at NYU.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, Eduardo Rodriguez is a Cuban boy from, grew up in Miami. So, I don't know if you call that fate or just like really, really good luck. But with the very strong suggestion by my dad, who was like, you have this
Of
connection,
course.
just like reach out to him. And I was totally timid. I was like, I'm just like this lonely medical student. Like, who knows why would this guy ever, give me the time of day? I just cold emailed him. seeking out advice and demonstrating an interest in plastic surgery. And he set up a meeting with me, and he basically interviewed me. That meeting very quickly turned into an interview. He had just landed at NYU shortly before. He got an IRB approval to do another face transplant, and he's a strong presence and a very motivating kind of person. Beautiful character, really. And he quickly invited me to be part of his face transplant team as a researcher. And I spent 2 years of research. I spent 2 years of dedicated research time with him and the department. So that's when I really was able to take, a much better dive into it. Dr. Rodriguez had hired a research fellow who had a lot of experience with the Boston face transplant group right before I had met him for this interview. So he sort of paired me and this other individual together who's a really outstanding guy, Rodrigo Diaciso. So Rodrigo and I kind of just became like the research group, and we pushed a lot of clinical projects forward. Got to mess around with some cadavers. And that's when I really started learning what plastic surgery, most specifically craniomaxillofacial surgery, was. And so it's great because my intro to plastic surgery was really focused on the face, which is where my initial spark came from. But it's also had a huge influence into where I am right now. I also, at the time, had spent doing research with Roberto Flores, who was a newly recruited cleft and craniofacial surgeon back into the department. He trained at NYU, took a job elsewhere, and then Rodriguez had brought him back. So timing was just impeccable for me. Rodriguez had just started. Flores, was fresh back, and both were looking for, a young, enthusiastic medical student to, be prolific and push a lot of things forward. I had a lot of guidance from Rodrigo, who had experience in the research realm. And that's where it really started. That was the genesis of craniomaxillofacial surgery for me.
And Dr. Rodriguez, didn't he do? I'm missing it. Didn't he do like 2 fellowships out in? One was in like South Asia, was it? And then another one was. Do you remember? I forget.
So he went through the dental route for schooling, and then he did
He did oral surgery.
Residency. Yeah, then he did residency for oral surgery. But I think he was sticking dental alveolar, and then something pivoted in him, and then he went out to medical school, got his MD, and then did a fellowship in plastic surgery at Hopkins.
Yes.
And I forget how long that was at the time. And then he went out to Taiwan to do a microvascular.
That's what it was. Yeah. I mean, the guy is just a wealth of experience. He has pretty much hit all the bases, and then he's at the cover. Wasn't he in that Super Bowl commercial last year when Langone had like he was one of the guys in it. Another thing, I did anesthesia for a couple of his cases. This is 5 years ago, actually exactly 4 years ago now. But he's also huge. He's like 6'5" or tall. I don't know. It's just he's got a special little like headlight and seat in there. But
yeah. No. I will say one of my strongest mentors, and I mean, what a pioneer surgically. And he's an entrepreneur in and of itself. He's led the plastic surgery department at NYU very, very well. But he has given me a lot of wonderful life advice. And so coming back to NYU for fellowship to train under him was an absolute no-brainer for me. But yeah, you don't have a sense of my height, on the screen, but I'm like barely 5'3". And so when I would operate with him, I never reached the point of being on 2 stools, but like I would be on a step stool on the side of the bed, and he'd be at the head of the bed sitting down. Like that was sort of, how we leveled off. But, to give you a sense of what kind of an educator he is, he would accommodate things so that whoever had the saw in their hand had the advantage. And it wasn't always him. He handed things off. He taught well. He led by example, but, he would let you ride in a very guided and a very supervised, controlled fashion. Things were leveled and even across the table.
I got a question for you then. So you were at NYU for medical school, and you were totally intertwined with Dr. Rodriguez, with Dr. Flores. Why did you go over? Tell me about going to UPenn.
Penn, NYU has a phenomenal training program. They really do. They're next level. What I very much enjoyed about training at Penn was CHOP. Having a standalone pediatric hospital really sort of it changes the game quite a bit for cleft and craniofacial training. And I think that the volume that I was able to see at CHOP was just like unbelievable. I did a sub-I there in the summer, and like my mind was completely blown. It's a very busy hospital at CHOP, and sort of the way the residency is designed is every hospital site is just as busy. So you can't sort of allocate all of your residents to any one place. So you really only have like two, maybe three residents at any given time rotating in the hospital that should really have like five or
Yeah.
six residents roaming around. And so what that meant is you worked a little bit harder, but that work was just it was excellent. I think by like my PGY2 year, I had already done like 12 or 13 cleft palates. Like as a first assist to the attending, the volume was high. The teaching was at like the highest quality, and like I saw some fascinating stuff at CHOP. Like during my time there, I'm trying to think. I think there may have been like maybe three conjoined twins that were separated, probably maybe like four sets. I wasn't involved in all of them, but I got to scrub in on one and then like very closely follow two other sets of twins. And I think another set was separated like when I was a junior resident. So like conjoined twins are not something that you really come across almost ever. And, in 6 years at CHOP, there's now four sets of them. And when I graduated, actually, there was still a set who were being expanded for separation. So sort of just to give a little bit of a glimpse of what, not just the volume, but the complexity of pathology that I was able to get exposed to in residency. That was
Yeah. And just back to my question was why you went over that's excellent. I mean, the experience that you got there is obviously second to none. I was just curious because the pathway through NYU, I feel like it was a gap to go to UPenn and then come back. I felt like you would have just gone all the way through. As also you said that you liked Manhattan, but you're back. Did you always know you were going to kind of go over there to CHOP in that hospital, get that experience, and then come back and do a fellowship, or did that kind of come out later? You know what I mean?
yeah, I it was kind of part of the plan. It was definitely part of the plan in the beginning. When I first matched, I really had that sense like, okay, I'm coming back to NYU. And then for fellowship, like that's always sort of part of that. What was also fun about coming back in the way that I did was that I got to operate with Rodriguez as a fellow one-on-one at high frequency throughout an entire fellowship year. Whereas in residency, you go off service. Some of the more senior residents spend the time with the chief or the chairman of the department. So I liked how that sort of panned out for me. But when I first matched, I thought, I want to come back to NYU. And then, but I always knew I wanted to do craniofacial surgery. And then
Okay.
somewhere, yeah, like that was kind of like a no-brainer. And then somewhere in my second year, I got a lot of advice, like don't narrow yourself in, explore all these different things. And I did, and I give that advice myself now because I kind of wanted to experience every other aspect of plastic surgery, give it a real shot, and then tell myself, no, this is not what I want to do. And so but then that kind of evolved a little bit later, as I came into my more senior years and started looking closely at other fellowships, then you start to realize what other all these fellowships have their own personality, they have their own strengths and their weaknesses. And I started dabbling into what that landscape looks like and where NYU falls into that. Ultimately, the decision was quite easy to make. Like NYU was just the perfect fellowship for me for like a long list of reasons that we can talk about. But I will say confidently that these decisions that I've made have not been for naught, and there was a lot of deep thought, consideration, and sort of planning throughout. So that definitely took place.
Yeah. And so tell me about all these reasons because you said there was like a list that we could touch on a few of them. Also, was the fellowship was 2 years, no?
1 year.
It was 1 year. Okay. Yeah, let's go into those, and then I want to hear the transition into Dr. Hannah's practice, Hannah Face and Jaw.
Sure. So fellowship was, it's really sort of the final year. It's not the year that you develop the skill, it's the year that you sort of finesse it. And probably for me, it was less about skill and more about clinical thinking. Like, why do you do something? When do you indicate for surgery? And more importantly, when do you not indicate for surgery? Complication management, just like the way that your mind should go and sort of like clicking in and out. Plastic surgery, maxillofacial surgery, facial reconstruction, it's not algorithmic like a lap appy would be. Like it's not a stepwise pattern that's replicable time and time again.
Yeah.
So it's, I was happy and confident that I got the skill during residency. And so I wanted fellowship to be more about the thinking and the clinical decision making. So that's definitely something that I got out of fellowship. The NYU fellowship is unique in that it hits pediatric and adult. So many craniofacial fellowships are pediatric focused because craniofacial conditions are mostly congenital, and sort of that's the population that's treated. But NYU, is less of a craniofacial fellowship, and it's more of an anatomic based fellowship, meaning
Mm.
you're sort of understanding the face and the cranium, whether that's in a child, an adult, an adolescent, and sort of you have to sort of understand the battle of time and how growth patterns in children will change, how aging
Mm.
patterns in adults will sort of affect. And you can have like a stellar immediate result on table or even in the first 3 months. But then over time, gravity, normal aging, puberty, that if that's not taken into account, you will very quickly fall into like a suboptimal result. And so what's actually kind of cool about the face to me is that you almost need time to see what your results will look like and
Mm.
see, and then adjust techniques accordingly. And you have to pay very close attention to what your results are. So you almost are like a pupil of your craft for the duration of your career. And
Hmm.
that is like so fun to me because otherwise you could get really good at something. It takes you 5 years, then you're great at it. It becomes monotonous. And then 10 years out, you're just bored and you did all this training to be like a middle-aged board surgeon. Unfortunately, I've seen it a lot. I've seen so many people, they take a turn. Something happens in like year 7 or 8 of practice. And
Mm.
that's probably when you max out on sort of your skill and innovation. And some people turn that like as a fuel for their engine in academia or in innovation and device. And I think some people, they kind of just peter out. So
Yeah.
I think that, paying attention to that. And when you really, it was the craniofacial surgeons for me in residency who I saw like really taking a close eye at what their outcomes were every single day and wanting to improve it more and more and more. And then they were like excited to come in each day. They were excited for plagiocephaly clinic, right? Because their mind was always thinking, they were always turning, so plagiocephaly clinic can be like a pretty mindless time and you just sort of tell a bunch of kids they need helmets for abnormal head shape.
Mm.
But when you take a lot of pride in what you do, then that's what's exciting. Your patients feel it, your staff feels it, your colleagues feel it, your family feels it, and your results will show it.
For sure, for sure. And you know what I like about it too? And you have this with your background in dancing. There's an art when you work to the face. There's such an art to it. And like you said, it's not an algorithmic base, right? Because it's like you're taking a sprinkle of here and then you're adding on the soft tissue on top of that and kind of there's just so many different the asymmetries. There's so many different directions we can go on the face. And then the nitty-gritty detail comes down to be so important, right? Like a couple millimeters here and there results in it can be like this is the person's face, this is how they have to talk to people, this is how they have to present themselves at interviews. And so yeah, we have to be perfectionists. This is one of the reasons why I love the maxillofacial part of
Yeah.
OMFS. But yeah, do you feel like the initial bringing you back to your past and history with dancing, do you think that kind of translated into the art? Because that it's totally separate, right? I understand that, but like there's an art to it. Do you think that translated into your work too as a surgeon?
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Because dance is a performing art, but it's a visual art, right? Like you have to have you feel it, but y- dance is interesting because it's regimented, and especially in ballet, there's like a lot of dogma of discipline, of strictness. You sort of follow certain schools of ballet. There's a Russian school, there's a Western school, but then it allows for creative expression, and so I think that and sort of tying it into your question earlier, like that's what's so beautiful and wonderful about hand, face, and jaw. It's principles based, safe, sort of thoughtful and methodical surgery that can be sort of categorized as sort of a little bit, mathematical and sort of measurements and considerations, but all of that ultimately gets trumped by what the aesthetic is, what's the visual, and it gives you a creative outlet to sort of take a sense of what somebody's face is like, what their personality is like, how do you want to bring out what they feel inside out into their appearance, And
I love
so
that.
it's taking something that's ultra precise. It's a game of millimeters so many times, but you have to take that in consideration with the overall face, the overall appearance. What are the proportions? What do balances look like? Just the other day, I was virtually planning some angle implants. And, like I'm sort of thinking, should I follow cephalometric proportions? Should I follow some of these measurements? And I have an idea of that in my mind. But as the planning session sort of goes through, like those numbers just get eliminated. You need them
Mm.
as a starting point, and you need to have that foundation. But all of that just gets completely overridden by, well, how does this balance out? This patient is sort of doesn't really fall into one specific category. They are sort of like in an ambiguous state. So how do we get this to fit the aesthetic they're looking for, but while maintaining the balance of their own face and facial harmony? So, and that's something that is so obvious for me in dance. And truthfully, it was almost like a point of frustration for me in training because it was something that I sort of had in the back of my mind. As a learner, you kind of want things to be a little bit more early on in residency. You want things to follow a little bit more in line, be a little bit more predictable and reproducible time to time. But then, like, as I gained seniority, like, I kind of didn't understand why other aesthetic considerations weren't being more put into play on certain planning. And it was some of the attendings that I had that like started thinking aesthetically that I sort of gravitated in the direction that they sort of have. It's interesting because so many of my strongest mentors throughout my time, medical school and beyond, have actually been dual trained with some sort of maxillofacial background. And I
Ah.
think that when you start to understand how hard tissue moves to soft tissue and how soft tissue needs to be redraped over the right bony framework, then you can start to sort of dabble into this sort of difficult thing it's kind of hard to define,
Mm.
but I think that's what Hannah face and jaw represents. It's like it's an aesthetic maxillofacial practice that doesn't really fall in any sort of existing category of maxillofacial or plastic or facial plastic, but it's sort of a conglomerate of all of the best parts into sort of, if you follow that Venn diagram, what's at the core of it all.
Yeah.
It's unique, it's innovative, and what's fun about it, it's like kind of undefined at the moment, but very quickly starting to take form.
Right, because it's personalized to the patient. It's about what the
Right.
patient needs. And that doesn't fit into any one basket necessarily, right? And I think that's so cool about the dynamic between you and Dr. Hannah, because actually Dr. Hannah also maxillofacial oral surgery background initially, just like a lot of your mentors through your training, and now you're back with another one, which is pretty cool. But honing in like obviously the face and such. But yeah, so that plastic surgery background, and then you got his background in the OMFS world, and now you're coming together to kind of develop the projects that you want. Because in residency, a lot of us were guided by whatever the training is about or provides, like what you were saying before, kind of like the standard of whatever you're on. But now you can design it for yourself. So, which procedures have you found in these last couple of months? I really wanted to ask this the whole chat. What do you love doing right now? Like, what's your favorite? What do you love to really get into? Like, oh, you see this patient walk in the room, you're like, oh, we got to do this. We got to talk, you know?
Yeah. Well, I totally know what you mean. I think it's not like a single procedure, but what's the right cocktail?
Right. Of course,
You know,
combinations.
it's like what's the combination, and I think that's sort of in certain elements of my training. Like patients got like parts of the cocktail, but not all of it in full. So like,
Right.
how do we give them the complete package? For me, probably the complete package is some combination of orthognathic surgery with a rhinoplasty.
Mm,
We have like a pretty decent understanding of how nasal aesthetics are influenced with jaw movement, specifically maxillary advancement. And then there are ways to control for that. And I really like the way that the practice and the way that Todd is sort of implementing that in a lot of his cases. And I'm seeing that in his own patients. So you can control for certain movements, but for some patients' anatomy, like they're going to need a formal rhinoplasty. And
yeah.
so fitting in the rhinoplasty after an orthognathic surgery when considering aesthetic sort of drivers for these patients, I think like that's the icing on the cake.
Mm,
And that's what's fun about coming in from the plastic surgery side. Like my craniofacial training has, and certainly, my experience during residency with a lot of the cleft and craniofacial kids that we did a fair amount of orthognathic surgery for, that gives me like the solid foundation of like, how do we get a stable occlusion? How do we get the jaws in right position? How do we, augment the profile? How do we get the lower third of the face where we want it? But
right.
then my plastic surgery background and interest is what's sort of driving me to say, okay, now let's fix the nose, or not fix, but how do we optimize the nasal
Mm.
aesthetics? I've noticed for a while now, patients who are unhappy with a certain part of their face, they get really fixated on that one thing, and you can correct it to their ideal, and they're really, really happy. But now, like like a light bulb turns on in their head, and they're now focused on something else that probably made them a little bit unhappy before. But the
Mm.
first problem was they were hyper focused on that it sort of minimized how disappointed they were with the other side of it. And I think the nose falls into that when we're talking about orthognathic surgery.
All the time, all the time. I see a lot of. I think patients, at least just over the years, I've definitely seen nose, obviously teeth, just in dental school and whatnot. But I definitely see nose probably number one what people look at. Or at least the patients I've talked to, they're very concerned with how their nose looks.
Yeah,
So it makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I mean, like the nose is the central part of the face. It's funny actually because during residency interviews, I was totally caught off guard, but one of my interview questions was, what is the most anatomically beautiful and harmonious part of the human body?
Huh.
And I was not expecting that question. And in something of a panic, I just remember staring at the interviewer's face and looking at their nose and saying, the nose. And I had a very clever response to follow, which was, talking about nasal reconstruction being some of the earliest documented surgeries of facial reconstruction, and how nasal amputation was a form of punishment for sort of in many years ago for adulterous acts or thievery or whatever it was. And so there was a need for nasal reconstruction earlier than any other type of facial reconstruction,
Mm, I see.
which is interesting because even back then, in Egyptian type times, people understood the nose to be an identifying element of the face, and any sort of change to that structure would very much change somebody's appearance and impact it more than the eyelids, the middle face, or the lower face. So yeah, I think that the nose is sort of an eye grabber for some people. I think that it's probably one of the structures that changes the most with puberty. So you see a lot of teenage girls and sometimes teenage boys who are like get very quickly fixated on their nose because it's one of the first things that they start noticing a change in their body. And then there's a huge functional element to the nose, right? Like I think breathing is pretty important, and
Not important.
like yeah, I feel it. Like I get a little cold and I get stuffy, and immediately I remember how I take for granted, breathing comfortably and easily. So there's certainly a functional gain to rhinoplasty.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What do you? So, I mean, I'd love to keep you on all day. But no, I feel like we have so much to get to too, because I had a sequence of like the journey and then into resident, and I want to know more about. Let's go a little more on the practice, but I also wanted to hear a little bit about like what you do outside of work and of residency, what you got through. We talked about wine a little bit. Wanted to see like, but okay, so the last one on the practice. So you've been there just over 2 months now. Excellent. And what days are you working too? Because that's another thing. Do you have to go on weekends? Are you there Monday through Friday? Which hospital are you affiliated with? Is it NYU? Is it Little Uptown? Is it Lenox Hill?
Yeah, so I've just, it's been great. The practice has welcomed me with open arms, and I feel like from day one I was just a real team member. So I'm there every day. We have an administrative day, and I'm still ramping up, so I don't have too much to administrate. But we work collaboratively and in unison as a team. So I help out sort of at every stage. We have a nice distribution between days being totally focused on clinic and consults, which I like, and then surgery days are just surgery days. So I really like how that's sort of designed and built out. I think that
Which days are which?
Thursdays are the big surgery days.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And then, you asked about hospital privileges. So we do some cases out in Mount Sinai West. That's where Dr. Hanna has his privileges and getting privileges there. But I'm not sure I don't know if this came up in a prior interview with him, but he has built out a really
Mhm.
beautiful, state of the art, like just pristine surgical center in the office. So two outstanding operating rooms that operate at full capacity. And patients really like it because it's private. You don't have to sort of be in a big hospital with like a ton of people sort of roaming around. It's a little bit more of an individualized experience for the patients. It's also the same location where they have their first consultation, so there's a lot of familiarity there. It feels a little bit more exclusive. There aren't so many people around. All of the team members you've met before are the only faces that you'll see that day. We have like a nice recovery pre-op area, like right next to the ORs, and that's sort of the recovery bay as well. It really is a beautiful space that was designed with a lot of thought. And I mean, like I'm used to being a resident and a fellow at like phenomenal institutions, but like institutions nonetheless. And so I feel completely spoiled that right off the bat I get to operate out of some of these just like fantastic spaces. So I still look around and I'm like, whoa, like I get to be here. They're phenomenal. And I don't say that to say that I'm sort of like young or naive or anything, but I do have a very strong appreciation for the quality of the work. And that I think that sort of represents what the practice is. It's a culture of excellence. It's a culture of beauty. It's a culture of privacy, and one that like really puts every patient first. And it's real special.
It sounds amazing. I'm gonna come up there, and there's a couple of weeks. It's this month that I was talking about coming in and seeing the new everything that he put together, and hopefully you would be there. I forget what day it was. I didn't look at the calendar. I put it in back in August or early September maybe, and so it's been a little while since I looked at the date, whatever it is. It's later this month, but yeah, I hope
I'll
I
be
get
there.
to. I hope so. Yeah, I want to say hello. So what do you do? What do you do outside of work and everything? Just on the outside of your life, you know? What do you do? Big question I get, by the way, on like TikTok lives and stuff or whatever. On questions there, how do you manage all the stress? So you've done countless years of training and education and exams and just rigorous because at least the plastic surgery residency and residents that I know, they stick to that schedule and they're pretty tough. How do you kind of escape that? How do you kind of maybe unwind or like take a second to just kind of you be yourself and you do your thing? You know what I mean? What's a hobby, maybe a passion?
Yeah. I mean, I recognize that I've only been 2 months into this practice, but it's so funny because sometimes like being in the office and being with the team is the stress relief.
Hmm.
It's phenomenal. Like it's almost like an indescribable feeling that like it's collaborative. Everybody sort of has the same mentality, and like if I'm sort of starting to feel a little bit down, like the team really lifts you up, and then everyone kind of takes on that role at stages. So in some regards, just like being there is great. Doing my first several cases outside of training, and that's stressful. And just being with the team, when you're surrounded with the right people, a lot of that stress can just like so quickly evaporate. So I think there's something to be said about that. Now, you can't say that your stress relief is work. I'm not, suggesting that to be the case. But when you pick the right job, then it can be, or the stress that you have it doesn't feel so burdensome. But things I like to do.
That's a great point. That's a
Um,
great point too, by the way, because a lot of people that stress from residency carries on because they didn't pick the job. They pick that job around what income it's going to be, or the stipend, or the location, whatever it may, or the mentor, quote unquote mentor that didn't ever show up. And so I know that's a really important thing. When you could find a job that fits you to the T, you need to have the self awareness to say that, and also put in the time to find the right position, right, and try and
yeah.
get the reps in, see what's out there. No, that's just I had to stop because that's such a good point. When you can go to work and you're excited to go every day, and when you're there and the stress is actually minimized in such a high pressure environment, you're changing
Yeah.
someone's face for the rest of their life potentially. No, I kudos, perfect, spot on.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. It's worth repeating. And just to like emphasize it for some of the younger viewers out there, I spent a lot of time considering this job, like even before I had reached out to Dr. Hannah. Like
Mm.
I'd done a lot of research, I had done a lot of like, reflective work. Being honest with what you want is the most important thing when looking for a job. I think a lot of people get confused and they confound sort of the job market or the lack of. It's
Yeah.
really, I found some of the missteps are when you're not quite honest with what you want, or you think you know what you want, or you know what you want, but you don't pair it with the right kind of group.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a lot of work beforehand. But yeah, I mean, like there were so many times that even weekends off felt like I felt this heavy weight on my shoulders because I knew I had to go back to an unfavorable environment on Monday morning, and it really started to take a toll on me. And like right now, like I'm like looking forward to Mondays. I'm looking forward to meeting new patients and having them like ask about what can be done. And like, I'm like so excited to see the post-ops, and, it's not all beautiful. It's not all perfect, but like, and it's, it's certainly early, and there are challenges and obstacles, but like, it's just a very different game when you have the right fit. But I'm not, I want to get to your question about like what I do for
Yeah.
fun. I think I like to be like physically active. I like sort of just doing something new and different that like uses my body. And I don't like sort of doing the same things over and over again. So, like, I'll give you an example. Recently, like out in Jersey, like on the 9W route, it's like a very popular cycling route. And I had, like, we had gone, like, we drive up there often. And I like seen all these cyclists, and we were just like, hey, like, can we do that? Like, yeah. So we just found this bike shop that rented us these like really expensive, nice, professional
No
looking
way.
bikes, got a helmet, and just started riding. And, these cyclists, we've sort of found this route because there's this really good market. I don't really know where it is, but it's like in northern Jersey, Bergen County, that has like good, clean, healthy eats. And then they have a burger station right next to it. And we'd seen like the cyclists come over, and that it's like a stop for them. So we were just like, yeah, let's get some bikes. Let's start, cruising. I mean, I'm not a cyclist. Like, other than, whatever bike my dad taught me how to ride when I was 10. Like, I don't have a lot of experience. Just did that. We just did it this weekend. Cruised up, 11 miles up to the marketplace. Get a little burger, get some tuna steaks. The first time we did it, we rode back, which was a lot of fun. The hard part of riding back is like when you first leave the market, there's like a very steep hill. That like will make you regret all of the French fries you ate. And then when you think you're done, there's an even steeper hill that will just take your soul with you. So, but like overcoming that is fun, and seeing it is
Yeah.
hard. That's sort of like one thing. I'm not an outdoorsy person, but like, I get challenged to sort of do that sort of thing. So over the weekend did like a cool trail, like on, I don't know, some like unbeaten path, somewhere in Jersey with a beautiful look out of the city. Yeah, I like when I was in Bali, for example, I went surfing for the first time. And like I'd never
No
surfed. I lived
way.
in Miami, spent all this time on the beach doing, all sorts of nonsense, but like never surfed. I'm in Bali. I went to Uluwatu, which is like really famous for surfing.
Huh.
Got like a really cheap surf lesson. I think it cost us like $30, and got a guy to like show us what to do. He told me exactly when to get on the board when the wave was coming, and like stood on the board. So I don't know, like just trying like new adventurous type of stuff like that. I find a lot of enjoyment in it. And there's something to say about like the spontaneity, like when there's like not
Yeah.
something planned, but you can just kind of like fall into it, and then remember that, I have training, a dance background. I like to exercise and go to the gym and like, somewhat stay fit, but like knowing that your body's athletic enough to take something on
Mm.
that's never done before and not totally fail at it. I think that's a rewarding thing for me. And so, if I let go of stress, that way, I think that's a pretty good way to do it.
It's really rewarding. Do you ever get nervous about injuries, though? Especially with surfing, you know what I mean? Sometimes there's rocks underneath when you fall. Do you ever get nervous about hands, wrists, or being a surgeon,
Yeah, I do. I went skiing for the first time last winter. I had skied like maybe as a
A lot
kid
of first
once.
times for you right now. This is
Yeah, lots of firsts, lots of firsts. But like that, that's what makes it fun,
it's exciting. I know. I know.
But remember earlier when we were saying like, you have to know your limitations and know when to scale
Mhm.
back? Skiing was that for me. I looked around and I noticed very, very quickly that like I can't go at any kind of speed relative to a lot of the other skiers. And I was nervous about falling, getting injured on my own, but I was also just really nervous about like some crazy skiers coming behind me and,
Mm.
causing some, something of a ruckus. And like, you have these young athletic teenagers who are having fun with their friends and like want to show off a little bit. I don't want to get stuck in their crossroads.
Yeah.
And I think skiing accidents can be pretty deleterious. So that's one that I, would like step away from. There are certain things. For example, like I used to city bike around the city. That was like my number one form of transportation. I loved city bike. So
Me too.
efficient, so inexpensive. Like I, as a woman, don't have to worry about sort of dangers in the subway, like some of the characters in the bus and stuff. So I loved it
Hmm.
for so many reasons. And even though I hate the cold, I would just like power through even in the wintertime. I got these gloves and they were great. But yeah, I really scaled back. My dad had told me for a long time, like, don't like just get off the bike. It's not worth it. It's, you're really going to injure yourself. And I kind of just set that aside for a long time. But something happens when, you're in practice, so much more
Yeah.
is at stake. Even just like 6 weeks in a cast could derail you big time. It truly isn't worth it. And I've had a lot of other, wise, influential people tell me the same thing.
Yeah.
And I could be stubborn at times, so it took me a while to get off the city bike, but I kind of have now for the most part. Like I'll cruise up and down the West Side Highway, and that's still pretty beautiful and overall safe. But
Safe it.
yeah, I think on the roads with the cars and with a lot of the other electronic bikers, delivering food and stuff, like they're out on a mission. So I'd rather not, put myself in harm's
Yeah,
way.
for sure. I'm very stubborn about it. I really enjoy a nice city ride. It's exactly what you said. You kind of avoid the people in the buses and the subway. And also, when you kind of get up to that Central Park area where it's just one lane, less lights, or maybe in Central Park, it's really such a peaceful, or the West Side Highway, like you're saying, it's such a nice ride. What do you think of those gray city bikes, though? Those things fly. The gray
The
ones,
gray ones. Oh, I don't think I've seen those.
The lighter gray, whitish, the
Like
electric
the
ones.
the lime ones.
Are they lime? It's like a brighter gray, not the blue one, because you know the blue ones, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then the blue
Yeah.
electric, but then the really fast. It's like I would call like a grayish, whitish. No, you
Okay.
don't. They're
I'm not sure.
so
Is it through City Bike?
yeah, yeah, yeah. They're at the city bike stations. They're bigger. They're really fast.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So sorry, semantics here, so that I know where we miss each other. So that's what I would ride. Those gray city bikes.
Yeah, yeah.
Those
The gray
electronic
ones.
ones. Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
go so fast. You literally hit a
Yeah, they
bump
go
and you catch
fast.
air.
Yeah, and like I'm a little bit of a light person, so I can really get some height on that.
Dangerous.
Yeah, those are exactly the ones that I would bike. But like, I mean, I loved it. I would commute to NYU at the hospital for fellowship 6 minutes.
Yeah.
It was like
Oh, not
it was
bad.
a no brainer. Yeah, it was so easy. It made things pretty simple, and like it's fun. There's like a little bit of an adventure with each ride.
I love it.
But yeah, you
I'm on
just
the
got
same
to be careful.
page. I am.
I do think the scooters are more dangerous
Oh, for sure.
because the wheels on the scooter are so small that if you think of like the revolution across each one, you fall into a pothole, you can't really get out of
You're
it.
done. You're done.
Yeah, and the speed, the momentum will keep you propelled forward. We saw a lot of injuries. You probably did too. But funny enough, I'm co-author on a paper that's now submitted and under review, looking at craniofacial injuries from trauma from electronic scooters and bikes in the city.
That's so important. I think that's tremendous. No, great that you did. I mean, unfortunately, so obviously unfortunate, right? But with the injuries and stuff. But I think that is so important. I really think
Yeah,
scooters are number one for trauma, especially facial trauma in Manhattan. I really do. I believe that.
yeah, yeah. We looked at a lot of the numbers. Helmeting was obviously protective. That was an easy hypothesis. But one of the more important findings was actually that injuries tended to be more severe for the pedestrians struck than the riders on the electronic vehicle.
Wow.
Because most of the collisions are not biker to biker or scooter to scooter. It's usually pedestrian hit from one of these vehicles. And so a lot of the pedestrians were more likely to get head bleeds and need interventions for facial fractures.
Jeez. Oh man.
So, like, once the paper gets published, I kind of want to push the team to get a little bit more publicity on it, on the results, because like there should be a real call to action for people in the city to have just like that little bit of, you know, heightened alertness to these scooters coming in. Oftentimes they're coming in the wrong direction, so like looking both ways
Mm-hmm.
is like more important now than ever. And I don't think it's going to get better, honestly. So I think that we as a community owe it to the civilians to make sure that safety is at the forefront.
And I agree. I do think it's going to get worse. There's only going to be more. I've been living there. I was living there for resident. You were there for medical school. You were there for fellowship. I mean, there's so many more people now on the streets, on those scooters, on those bikes, on the Uber and other like delivery people. There's more and more and more and more because they want to avoid that subway. They want to avoid the cost of the Uber, and I get it because that's what I was doing through residency, right? And then more people are ordering for the convenience of food and nutrition, whatever
Mm-hmm.
their groceries they're ordering out. There's just more and more
Mm-hmm.
bikers on the road, and it's making it more and more dangerous. Yeah,
Certainly.
I totally agree with that. And, oh man, thank goodness you're doing the diligence on that. You got to get that published. Send it over to me. I'll put it up on the story and everything. I want to read
Cool.
it. I want to
Yeah.
see the results.
Yeah, it was part of the sort of NYU craniofacial team, something that they sort of pushed together. They got all of the injuries from Bellevue. I think I want to say over like the last 5 years. I don't remember how
My
far back
patients
it
are in there too.
goes, but Yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. There's a lot of statistics coming out of that hospital, especially for trauma, and especially in those because I don't know over the course of my 4 years there was less like gunshots, more high speed moving vehicles, and just scooters, bikes, and slash wounds to the face.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh man, this was a great time. Thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm like totally honored to be, a part of it, and it feels like a nice extension from your prior conversations with Todd.
Yeah. And we'll have more in the future too. I'm looking forward to seeing you. I don't. I gotta see where the date is. You know what? Let me pull it up right here. I got it. There's somewhere here. It's gonna be around the 20th. Do you think that the full suite is it already open yet? He was saying wait till end of November to December. I just threw a date in the books.
Yeah. The 20th is a great day. I think that's a Thursday, right?
So that's a surgery day for you though.
Yeah. So that should be a surgery day.
Is that a good day though? If it's a surgery day?
Yeah. I think it'll be nice for you to see it all in action and,
It is a
get a
Thursday.
sense of what's going on.
It's in 2 weeks.
It's 2 weeks. I mean, like Thanksgiving's around the corner. It's just unbelievable. Time moves, so you even more reason to make sure you're happy with where you are.
Yeah. Hey, so
But
thanks for coming
yeah,
on. Well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks then. I'm excited.
sure thing. I definitely look forward to seeing you and meeting you in person. Congratulations on
Too.
finishing training, starting this practice, getting things moving. Like, congrats on the
Thank you.
podcast. It's been hugely successful, and yeah, I look forward
Thank you.
to
And
chatting more.
likewise too. Congrats to you too. So,
Thank you.
hey, do me a quick favor. I'm gonna hit end. If you could just wait 10 seconds, it'll show you a line. It's like uploading. It'll
Okay.
take like 5 to 10 seconds. If you could just wait 1 second.